Hello and welcome to this ChangeBASE podcast. We have Chris Jackson with us today. He is the Principal Application Compatibility Consultant for Microsoft. And we also have Greg Lambert, the Chief Technical Architect from ChangeBASE. We're here to talk about Windows 8. We're going to be talking about what Chris and Greg think of Windows 8, what they're looking forward to most, and also what application compatibility challenges they anticipate with the new system. We're also going to talk about what everyone's talking about at the moment, XP to Windows 8. Is it possible? And do you have to go to Windows 7 or can you miss it out altogether? So Chris, what do you think of Windows 8?
My job is to talk for a living. And the job of the Windows team is to disclose things when they become actionable. So rather than, hey, here are the ideas we have, let's let the world fester over our ideas, it turns out that doesn't work because people don't hear them as ideas. People hear them as promises, and they start taking action based on that. So we've got I think a fairly sensible disclosure policy which says we'll tell you everything we can once you're able to take some action based on that. That there's a fairly high likelihood that what we've told you is going to result in you taking an action that's not going to waste your time, because that just makes people angry. So as a result, I've been trying to, I'm obviously involved in some of the conversation and some of the app compat goo that's going on underneath the covers. But on the higher level stuff, I've intentionally stayed away from it until everyone else got it too, because otherwise, if I accidentally talk about it, then I get to go talk to lawyers. So I've been running it now since it was released last week, and I happened to have been in the UK last week, and it didn't exactly have the highest bandwidth connection. But I managed to get it downloaded by the end of the week, which made me thankful for the download manager in IE9, and installed it over the weekend, and I'm about ready to take it on a trip with me to Tokyo as my one and only PC, because it's proven itself over the course of the week to be stable enough and compatible enough with my compatibility demos that I can completely do all of the same work that I was doing on Windows 7 on Windows 8, so I'm pretty happy with it from that perspective. And since I have a touchscreen on my little Lenovo tablet, it's just pretty freaking cool to use.
I can imagine the touch interface is going to be pretty. I think it's going to be pretty amazing. I'm really looking forward to that. I think one of the things you mentioned about having to be careful about what you say, I really share that. I really understand that. You're part of all these things that go, okay, I know all this, but should I be telling them? So you're loving it, you're enjoying it, you're using it, you're a brave man, but I guess that's part of your job. You've got
well, it's really, I'd say the strangest thing is this. So I've got my it's this little convertible tablet, right? So when I have the tablet, when the Metro screen comes up, you just can't help yourself but just reach up and touch it. Like it just is completely natural. What's weird is then I dock it, and then it comes up to just an external monitor that I've got. And I keep reaching up to touch my monitor, which will do absolutely nothing because it's not a touchscreen monitor. It's sort of hard to resist touching it when you don't have the touchscreen.
So the new behaviors are actually more natural than the old behaviors.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think it's going to be super exciting. And I love the idea of it being context aware. Dock it, it's a PC. Rip it out, run with it, it's a tablet. And it knows it. I think that's going to be really. So, if I have to ask for one feature, which you think right now is the coolest, is that one of them, or would there be another feature that you enjoy most about this?
Coolest feature? Oh wow, I don't think I came prepared to answer that question. It's just overall very very thoughtful. From my perspective, the coolest feature is that it works with all of the stuff that I need to do my job. Right. So I'm able to do it. It's the same thing with IE9, right? I had some hesitation when the IE9 beta came out because most of my customers, since we were beta, were still looking at IE8. So if I were showing IE9 and everything that broke on 8 still broke on 9, and everything that worked on 8 still worked on 9, then I could not only use that to give them the demos they needed for IE8, but to also show them that work would translate into success for 9. And that happened to be true. And so far, that is also the case for Windows 8, which is all of the demos I do of stuff that's supposed to break still correctly breaks on Windows 8 as it does on Windows 7. The same thing with IE 10 versus 9 or 8. so I can have one consistent story that says, hey, if we get this up to at least 8, right, using these same tools, using these same techniques, then that carries us forward, into the next version and the next version, and we're starting to tell a really compelling compatibility story.
Absolutely. Well, we've already heard that, but there's probably going to be no Flash support for the Metro UI, right? And,
no plug-in support, so it's not. We're not picking on anyone.
Right. Yeah.
And we still have that in the desktop version also.
Yes.
So it's not like we've completely eliminated Flash. The folks at Flash are really great partners of ours. Yeah. But the team has decided that from a strategy standpoint, they want to go plug-in free in the Metro UI to work on improving that experience.
And I guess that's why HTML5 is so key, right? You don't use plugins, don't use ActiveX controls. Use the features and functionality that's available in the HTML5. Is that it?
Yes. Yeah. So I think that that's the benefit of not only taking a can I just scrap this together and get it to work perspective, but to actually have organizations formulate a browser platform strategy, an HTML standards strategy that will say we're not just going to have any HTML that I can somehow manage to make render in some browser, but to instead say we want to have a minimum of an HTML4 standards-based interoperable implementation today. 5 probably makes sense for a lot of stuff, and more stuff as time passes. Yeah. So let's put in some quality bars, some gates that will say we want to make sure that you're rendering in at least this engine. Have you put in an XUA compatible tag that says I'm in at least 8? So that we opt you into at least HTML 4.01, and then as time passes, a larger and larger percentage go to at least HTML5 as of IE 9, as of IE 10, as of IE N.
Yeah.
Continue moving your own internal ecosystem forward to leverage that new platform and to stop training people to build things for what now can be in many cases a 15-year-old implementation of standards.
Absolutely, yeah.
So is there any one major application compatibility concern that you're predicting for Windows 8?
Oh, version checks.
Bingo.
But did you notice what version we are in Windows 8? Did you notice? Have you looked?
6.2. I haven't looked at
6.2.
6.2, yeah.
Yeah, 6.2. So all the same logic checking problems we had with the transition from XP to Windows 7, if they're not resolved, they'll just hit Windows 8 as well. So
they'll be hard-coded, right? So if we do great, I mean, the reason why it's 6.2 is because 6 is greater than or equal to 5 and greater than or equal to 6. So we'll match on, the
major version,
XP checks and the major version checks for 2000 and above. And also 2 is greater than or equal to 1 and greater than or equal to 0. Right? So we'll match correctly against XP, we'll match against Vista, we'll match against Windows 7. I can tell you that the team who decides that is now no longer folks who are deciding is this major, is this minor. The team that decides what the version number is going to be is the compatibility team. No one else.
Nice.
It was the same for Windows 7, right? It was 6.1 because 6 is greater than or equal to 5 and 1 is greater than or equal to 1. Right? Same thing for higher XP compatibility. It was nothing to do with how big or small the change was.
So it would be the logic checks.
So obviously we've been talking about going from 6 and rather getting off 6 and going from 6. I wanted to also talk about going from XP to Windows 8 and whether, Chris, you thought that a lot of people are going to try and squeeze it in and go straight to 8 from XP, or whether you're going to follow the Gartner and obviously Rich Reynolds from Microsoft saying that this isn't going to work and that people are going to have to go to Windows 7 first.
Well, I mean, inevitably there's going to be some people who do that transition. It certainly wouldn't be what we would recommend. For much of the same reasons. I mean, XP is going to start to have some of the same challenges that IE6 is having right now. So if you think about what you're blocked by if you're on IE6, if you're on IE6 today, you're going to have a hard time using Office 365 or SharePoint 2010. And you're going to have a hard time using Windows 7. So you're blocked from 3 of our most important pieces of technology that are causing a lot of customer delight. You just can't use them yet until you break that little addiction. When it comes to Windows XP, there's not as much yet. where you absolutely positively have to have something more current. I mean, the first thing we've seen is IE9. IE9 took that dependency in making its transition to being a DirectX application and really leveraging the power of the hardware, because we have a lot of expectations we have of the platform that Windows XP didn't meet. So we simply, with the display driver model that we had in Windows XP and the way that the graphic subsystem worked, it simply didn't allow us to do the same implementation that we had on Windows Vista and above when we did a complete gut and rewrite of the way that we render to the display. And I suspect there's going to probably start to be some more. There's also the fact that there's a timeline. We've support matters to you for your platform. We've got a countdown that's ticking. You have to then factor in, like, okay, well, I've got 927 days now before end of support. That's as of today. I'm not sure when people are listening to this.
Like a little countdown, don't we? A little counter.
We have one. It's a gadget. You can download the XP end of support gadget and have it sitting right on your desktop. And I have one. I don't actually memorize those days. I'm not quite that nerdy.
I'm gonna bing that now. I'm gonna do that now.
But it's on download.microsoft.com, and so I just have it running on my desktop as a little reminder of, hey, how much time do I have left? But that's your countdown till support is gone. At which point, most people need support for their client OS, so suddenly they're going to start paying a lot more for, custom support, after the support lifecycle ends.
Yep.
Most projects are, going to take some time to get through. I mean, one of the tasks that I have is trying to reduce the amount of time that takes, and it's getting shorter, because people happen to have upgraded a lot of their applications not for Windows 7 compatibility because they're still on Windows XP, but just by virtue of having bought the new one, it happens to be Windows 7 compatible. Right?
Yeah.
So a larger and larger percentage of the portfolio is compatible at the gate, just because of the passage of time. There's more and more knowledge in the ecosystem. Tools are getting better. It's easier to go later. I don't get the benefits, until much later at the same time, but that cost is going down. The one cost that's not going down yet is the average 12 to 18 months for a large enterprise of figuring out how much risk that there's going to be before you actually do anything.
So it's that risk assessment exercise, which is still very costly.
I don't think it necessarily comes into cost. It certainly is costly in terms of time. People are sinking various amounts of money in terms of resources that they apply to it. But it's just a long cycle before people even start doing any actual work. And just sort of figuring out, can we do this? Should we do this? How are we going to do this? How much risk? How am I going to manage that risk? And sort of figuring out what to do. The analysis paralysis that people end up spinning in for a while before they get started. We need to make sure we factor that in too. And one of my goals is to try to change the mindset to say, don't spend so much time. Manage your risk, but don't overmanage small risks. Manage big risks well. Manage small risks, a little bit. And things that really don't put you at risk, don't fret about them.
And again, it comes back to that challenge of assessing probability and severity, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, absolutely.
So you think the vast majority of enterprises will go to Windows 7 then?
Most people I know of have Windows 7 on their plans already. Now, whether they're able to execute and finish by then is another story. I think a very large percentage will. And I think that's something that people are seeing is that if the work I do now translates, then it might be worth it to finish, because Windows 7 already has the value prop for nearly everyone to want to get there.
Yeah,
right. And then Windows 8 just says, oh, here's some new scenarios. And what I can start to imagine is, if we can help people manage the risk, then it becomes interesting to say, you know what, maybe we'll have a more diversity in our environment to support some scenarios. So what if we wanted to make Windows 7 our standard for a desktop PC for now, so that we don't have to incur the cost of a migration, but initially start out deploying new tablet form factors with Windows 8.
Yeah.
And not have that be adding catastrophically to my overall management costs, right? That's the problem. The reason why people want to lock things in is because it costs too much historically to manage several things at the same time. With the advent of consumerization and people wanting to bring their own devices, we need to find better solutions to manage cost other than use draconian measures to ensure that there's no variation and that we have a completely homogeneous environment.
Yeah, I think it's a good point of the consumerization of IT, that heterogeneous, that are both one, heterogeneous, and two, changing choice of platforms and consumption of use. So I think absolutely agree on that. Very interesting.
So what version of Internet Explorer will be embedded into Windows 8?
As of the developer preview, it contains IE 10. I mean, that would be my best guess, right? And so we're putting something out there for developers, then we probably want to be looking at having a developer platform that will work, because that's part of having a healthy operating system release, is that you can have apps that work from day one. And that only happens if we give developers enough time to build apps and then don't come along later and whack them down. That we actually let them work.
And that's actually one of the reasons why you're able to use Windows 8 right now on your flight to Tokyo. That's the whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's shipping the bits that are stable and that developers can start building apps on. Now, of course, we're cautioning people, don't put this on production machines. Yeah. And you take your life in your own hands when you do that. And for me, it's I never can have a failed demo, if you will. What I always like to say at conferences is I never have a failed demo. I just have unplanned debugging demos. So
unplanned debugging sessions.
If I have a problem, right, what am I going to do? I'm going to throw a debugger on there. I'm going to figure out what it is.
Throw along for the ride. That's excellent.
Well, thank you very much, guys. We've talked about a lot already here today. Have you got any final thoughts on Windows 8?
I would like to say thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to sit and kind of geek out with you guys and talk about where we're going together and kind of trade war stories and sort of postulate in the future and where we're going. From my perspective, I think the important thing is to continue moving forward, right? So anyone who's currently on XP or currently on IE6 or currently on Office 2003, I think there's a lot of value in moving forward. We want to make sure that we're providing whatever help we can, and we've got a rich partner ecosystem to provide additional help to really build a comprehensive end-to-end solution to move forward. So number one is get off where you are as a point-in-time migration. And I think the other thing to take into consideration is, are there things you can be doing as you're doing this transition to make future transitions easier? The end result being, I'm not as concerned about can I use IE blah 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 or Windows blah blah blah. What I'm more concerned about is, have I become more agile so that if business demands that I am able to adopt a new platform in order to leverage some of that technology, that my technology infrastructure allows me to be as agile as my business needs to be.
Brilliant.
Great.
And any words from you, Greg?
I'm good, Emily. I've enjoyed the chat as well. I think sometimes I feel like we're in the app compat world all by ourselves. So it's great to hear Chris share some of these stories. I just thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. Absolutely delighted.
Well, thank you very much again, Chris and Greg, for the time you spent today talking about Windows 7 and Windows 8. Thank you for listening to this podcast. ChangeBASE is the world leader in automated application compatibility analysis, remediation and conversion. Our software suite AOK enables enterprises to migrate to Windows 7, the latest Internet Explorer, and virtual platforms from Citrix, VMware, Microsoft and Symantec. If you'd like to hear any more about the ChangeBASE product suite, or if you'd like any more information, you can visit our website, www.changebase.com. And if you'd like to try the software for yourself for free, you can go to www.changebase.com/AOK Lite. AOK Lite allows you to test a few websites and applications yourself against a lot of the functionality in the AOK suite. Well, thank you for listening to this podcast. I'm Emily Jones. Have a good day.